Picture this. You're sitting at your desk, you're, finally getting into this state of deep flow, and then ping, another email notification totally breaks your concentration.
Oh, the absolute worst.
Right. And it's the annual workplace engagement survey. So you stare at that 1 to 5 scale on your screen, you're hovering your mouse over the buttons, and you honestly can't help but wonder, like, if I give this a 3 instead of a 4, is a single thing in my day-to-day life actually going to change?
Usually the answer is a hard no.
Yeah, we have all been there. But here is the really crazy part. By clicking that button, you are basically participating in this massive $100 billion global illusion. You fill it out, HR makes a beautiful dashboard, executives stare at the dashboard, and then you just go right back to the exact same frustrating grind.
Exactly. It's an endless cycle.
So welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to figure out why modern work feels so, disjointed, and how the world's most innovative companies are stopping this endless cycle of measuring our misery. We want to see how they're starting to proactively design better daily work lives for you and your teams.
And honestly, it is a radical reimagining of what we owe people when they log on or walk through the doors. I mean, we are finally moving from a passive stance to an active one.
Yeah, and to explore this, we're pulling from a really compelling piece by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover. It's called From Employee Engagement to People Experience, Designing Human-Centered Work in the Age of AI. And, reading through his analysis, I just kept thinking that traditional engagement surveys are basically like doing a postmortem on a houseplant.
A postmortem. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, the plant is dead, right? The leaves are totally brown. But you're just sitting there meticulously measuring the dryness of the soil when you should have just designed a better watering schedule months ago.
That is painfully accurate. And the scale of that specific houseplant problem, that's what should keep leaders awake at night. I mean, Gallup estimates that organizations spend over $100 billion globally every single year on engagement initiatives.
Wait, 100 billion? With a B.
With a B,
Yep.
Every single year. Just think about that number. And despite that absolute torrential downpour of cash, the underlying problems just aren't moving. High performers, the people who actually score well on those surveys, they are still walking out the door.
Right.
And hybrid workers are reporting severe isolation even as they're diligently filling out these weekly pulse surveys. We've really reached a point where throwing money at measurement is actively distracting us from solving the structural issues.
Okay, let's unpack this because I want to push back on that just a little bit. If I'm managing a team, my first instinct is that, knowing I have a problem is step one. I mean, how can we fix something if we don't measure it? Is the act of measuring engagement inherently flawed, or are we just doing it wrong?
Well, measurement itself isn't the villain here. The issue is that an engagement survey is what we call a trailing indicator.
Meaning it's looking backward?
Exactly. Imagine driving a car by only looking in the rearview mirror. By the time someone tells you on a survey that they feel undervalued or, burned out, that dissatisfaction has already crystallized. The opportunity to actually meaningfully intervene passed you by weeks or even months ago.
Oh, wow. So you're just measuring the damage at that point.
Right. And Jonathan Westover points out that to fix this, successful organizations are shifting their entire vocabulary. They're deliberately moving away from this idea of employee experience and building what they call a people experience.
Okay, I have to admit, people experience sounds like the kind of corporate rebrand that gets workshopped for 6 months just to change the plastic sign on the HR door.
Yeah.
What is the actual functional difference for me sitting at my desk?
I get the skepticism, I really do. But the functional difference is how the company defines who you are. So employee experience views you entirely through a contractual lens. You're an asset. You exist between the hours of 9 and 5 to produce value, and the company's job is just to optimize your output.
Like a machine.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But people experience completely shatters that box. It acknowledges that you bring your entire complicated, integrated identity to work. You're a caregiver, you might have personal health challenges, you have community ties, you have financial stress.
Right, because I don't just magically stop being a parent and worrying about a sick kid or, a volunteer at my local food bank the second I log into a morning Zoom meeting.
Exactly. And trying to do so carries a massive cognitive cost. When you force people to fragment their identity, to suppress the person to perform as the employee, it drains the exact mental energy they need for creative problem solving.
That makes so much sense. It takes work to pretend you're just a worker bee.
It's exhausting. And when organizations intentionally support whole person well-being, they eliminate that identity fragmentation. Plus, the financial stakes here are incredibly hard to ignore. Organizations sitting in the top quartile of employee experience see 4.2 times higher average profit and double the revenue growth compared to those in the bottom quarter.
Okay, so this is definitely not some HR initiative about feeling warm and fuzzy. Yeah. It is hard economics.
Absolutely.
So if waiting around to measure engagement after the fact isn't enough, we really need to look at how organizations can actively architect better days. It reminds me a bit of being a movie director.
How so?
Well, you can't make every single second of a 2-hour film this massive adrenaline rush, right? There has to be exposition, there has to be quiet dialogue, but you absolutely have to nail the emotional climax and the ending to make it a movie people will actually recommend.
What's fascinating here is that behavioral psychology gives us a direct framework for that exact director analogy. It's known as Kahneman's peak-end rule.
Okay, what's that?
It's a foundational psychological principle showing that human beings do not experience time like a spreadsheet. We evaluate an experience based disproportionately on just two moments: its most intense point, which is the peak, and how it concludes, the end.
Oh, so when I think about whether I had a quote-unquote good year at my company, my brain doesn't just average out the 250 individual days I set at my desk.
Not at all. Your brain is highly selective. It remembers the extreme highs, the extreme lows, and the final impression. And in a workplace context, this is actually incredibly liberating for companies.
Liberating, because they don't have to fix everything all at once.
Exactly. It means you don't have to perfect every single mundane administrative process. Instead, you need to become obsessed with identifying high-impact moments: a new hire's first day, a difficult performance conversation, a major project failure, returning from parental leave. You map those specific journeys and you pour your design resources into them.
Right, and by journey mapping, you mean literally putting yourself in the user's shoes and visualizing the, I guess, the emotional arc of that specific event.
Yes, and Intuit is a prime example of doing this effectively. They looked at their hiring journey for software engineers, which is, as you can imagine, one of the most fiercely competitive talent markets on Earth.
Oh, for sure.
So through journey mapping, they zoomed in on a specific valley in the candidate experience. It was the gap between the final interview and the offer decision.
Oh, man, the waiting game. That is psychologically agonizing. You're just constantly refreshing your email, wondering if they hated your answers, and just hearing absolute silence.
It's a complete anxiety void. And what Intuit realized is that while candidates were sitting in that dark void, competing employers were swooping in with faster offers and stealing their talent.
Wow.
But notice what Intuit did next. They didn't arbitrarily inflate their salary offers to win them back. They didn't lower their hiring standards. They just redesigned the psychology of the wait. They introduced transparent timelines, they gave interim updates, and they basically pulled back the curtain on how the decision was being made.
So they essentially created a pizza tracker, but for a job application.
Functionally, yes. That's exactly it. And just by removing the ambient anxiety from that single touch point in the journey, their offer decline rates plummeted by 23%.
Wait, 23%? That is a staggering return on investment for what is basically just clear communication.
There really is.
It makes me think about the MasterCard case study in the text. They applied this same intentional design to the first 90 days of a new job. Because for most of us, onboarding is just this bureaucratic nightmare. You sign your tax forms, you watch a video from like 2014 about password security, you try to figure out where the bathroom is, and that's it.
Yeah, the standard sink or swim approach.
Right. But MasterCard decided to actually curate those 90 days.
They did. They treated onboarding as a psychological transition, not just a compliance checklist. They built these tailored learning pathways based on the specific role. And they created built-in accelerators, automatically connecting new hires with designated mentors so they didn't have to, awkwardly network their way into the culture.
And the results were huge. The time it took for new hires to reach full productivity dropped by 6 entire weeks.
Yep.
And their 12-month retention improved by 15 percentage points. I mean, they recovered a month and a half of lost productivity per employee just by designing a logical entry ramp.
But, okay, here's where it gets really interesting and where I get a little skeptical.
Lay it on me.
Journey mapping implies you are drawing a map, singular, but a global workforce has incredibly diverse needs. The text talks about using personas to manage this, And I just have to call a timeout here. Isn't creating personas just corporate jargon for stereotyping your employees and stuffing them into neat little demographic boxes?
If it's done poorly, absolutely. If you
Yeah.
just create a persona called Gen Z Tech Bro or, Boomer Accountant, you're engaging in lazy stereotyping and it will 100% backfire.
Right, that just feels out of touch. Because it is. But true organizational personas are rooted in behavioral data, not just age or job title. They exist to destroy the one-size-fits-all approach because, honestly, one size always fits nobody. A rigorous persona combines daily frustrations, working environments, and success criteria.
Okay, give me an example of how that works in reality without falling into that stereotype trap.
Let's look at the difference between designing a workflow for a mid-career professional returning from parental leave versus a first-time manager. Those aren't stereotypes. Those are distinct operational realities.
Right, they have completely different immediate needs.
Exactly. The returning parent might be desperate for asynchronous communication tools and rapid skill refreshers. The new manager doesn't need that. They need peer learning networks so they can figure out how to give constructive feedback. Unilever actually managed to scale this concept across a global workforce of 150,000 people.
Okay, designing anything for 150,000 distinct individuals just sounds impossible.
It is impossible, which is why Unilever used these data-driven personas to find the patterns. They analyzed the data and discovered this fascinating split. Their early career employees in emerging markets were highly motivated by aggressive skills development and the chance to get global exposure.
That makes sense.
But their highly experienced professionals in developed markets had completely different priorities. They valued work-life flexibility and purpose-driven projects over just climbing the corporate ladder.
So if Unilever had just rolled out a universal, global leadership program, half the company would have loved it and the other half would have completely ignored it.
And they would have wasted millions of dollars in the process. By customizing the experience to match these behavioral personas, Unilever improved their internal engagement and actually reduced costs by sunsetting HR services that nobody was even using.
Wow, so you just build the infrastructure people actually want. And speaking of infrastructure, we really need to talk about the digital layer of work.
Oh, yes, the
Yeah.
digital experience.
Because think about your own Tuesday morning, right? You open a sleek, perfectly designed app on your phone to order coffee, and it's flawless. And then you log into your company laptop, and it feels like you've time-traveled back to 2005. You have to click through 4 different portals just to request a single day off. That friction isn't just annoying, it is actively destroying productivity.
The term for this is the toggle tax. Knowledge workers lose an estimated 20 to 30% of their daily productivity just navigating poorly designed enterprise software.
30%, that's almost a third of the day.
It's huge. Just think about the cognitive drain. You're constantly authenticating logins. You're searching for a single PDF across Slack, email, and 3 different shared drives. Your brain is practically exhausted before you've even tackled your primary job responsibilities.
Well, Schneider Electric decided to tackle this toggle tax. And we're talking about 135,000 employees spread across more than 100 countries. It would be so easy to just, buy another app to try and glue it all together.
Which usually just makes it worse.
Right. But instead, they built an integrated digital experience layer. They put everything under a single sign-on. They added AI conversational support to answer basic HR and IT questions. And they made all their core workflows mobile first.
By fundamentally redesigning that digital environment to mimic consumer-grade technology, they essentially removed the ambient friction of the workday.
And the math on this is staggering. They saved every single employee an average of 35 minutes a week. Now, 35 minutes doesn't sound like much until you multiply it by 135,000 people over 52 weeks. You are suddenly liberating millions of hours a year, hours that are no longer spent resetting passwords, but can actually go toward innovation.
That's incredible, but while digital architecture is vital, we cannot forget that human interactions deliver the final product.
Right.
I mean, you can have the most beautiful software in the world, but if your boss is constantly stressed and snapping at you, your people experience is still going to be terrible.
Which brings us to the forgotten architects of all this, the managers. I always think of managers as the shock absorbers of a corporation.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, because they take all the heavy mandates and pressure from the executives above them, and then they have to absorb all the anxieties and diverse needs of the team below them. And usually, we expect them to do this without giving them any actual structural support. We just tell them to, be more resilient.
And that is a huge design failure. This raises an important question. If we acknowledge that manager quality is the single strongest predictor of employee well-being, then how are we designing the manager's day?
Usually we aren't designing it at all.
Exactly. If a manager is spending 60% of their week approving expense reports and navigating ambiguous compliance rules, they are not coaching their team. The burnout just ripples downward. Cisco looked at this systemic failure and decided to restructure the job itself.
So what did Cisco change? Did they just hire more HR people to help them out?
No, they turned to technology to automate the friction. Cisco deployed AI-powered administrative assistants specifically for managers just to handle the relentless routine approvals and scheduling. But they also addressed the isolation of middle management. They established these communities of practice-structured peer networks where managers could confidentially problem-solve with each other.
So they essentially designed the busy work out of the system and engineered a support network right into it.
And it completely changed how managers spent their time. Following this redesign, Cisco managers reported spending 40% more of their week on high-value team interactions.
Like actual coaching and mentoring.
Right, while significantly reducing their own feelings of being overwhelmed.
See, when you design a system that works, everybody wins. But there's a darker side to systemic design, too. Bad design doesn't just cause burnout. It actively perpetuates inequity.
It really does.
Traditional performance reviews are a great example of this. Studies constantly show that performance evaluation criteria just default to dominant cultural norms. Women frequently receive feedback that is incredibly vague compared to their male colleagues, which means they don't get the actionable advice they actually need to earn a promotion.
And when you design an experience assuming a default majority user, you inevitably create barriers for everyone else. Inclusive design requires a completely different mindset. It means proactively looking for those friction points and designing equity in from the absolute start rather than offering it as an awkward accommodation later.
Accenture's approach to parental leave is a perfect case study in how to do this right. So if you look at their policy on paper, it was gender neutral. It was technically available to all parents. But when they looked at the data, it was overwhelmingly only mothers who were actually taking the full leave.
Right, because a written policy cannot overcome an unwritten cultural stigma. If fathers feel that taking leave will secretly derail their careers, they won't take it, and the caregiving disparity just continues.
Exactly. So Accenture didn't just tweak the wording of the policy, they made equitable usage an explicit design target. They trained managers specifically on how to remove the stigma when a father requested time off. And even better, they established peer communities for dads who were taking substantial leave.
So they could actually talk to other men who had done it and survived career-wise.
Yes. They engineered psychological safety.
Yeah.
They recognized that taking leave is an emotional and cultural hurdle, not just an administrative one.
And the ripple effect there was massive. Father uptake of parental leave at Accenture increased by over 300%.
300%.
And here is the best part. Because fathers were finally taking on an equal share of the early caregiving, it dramatically improved the return-to-work experience and the retention rates for the mothers.
It is the perfect illustration of how designing for the margins ultimately improves the center for everyone. But, okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
So what does this all mean? We've covered some brilliant tactical wins. Intuit's hiring tracker, Schneider's digital layer, Accenture's leave policy. But can you genuinely design company culture? Because culture is organic, it's messy, it's human. Doesn't trying to engineer it just turn into corporate manipulation.
That is the most critical distinction in this entire conversation. You cannot engineer a toxic culture into a healthy one with just a few clever apps. If there is no foundational trust or psychological safety, introducing a slick onboarding portal is just putting fresh paint on a crumbling house.
Right, it's just a Band-Aid.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, to design at a true cultural level, organizations have to build long-term capabilities. Look at how IBM approaches this.
Well, IBM built what they call an Experience Design Academy. But how does a training academy actually change the culture?
It changes how the company thinks by building T-shaped HR professionals. So the top of the T represents broad knowledge. Every HR professional at IBM completes foundational training in experience thinking and journey mapping. This ensures everyone is speaking the exact same language.
Got it.
Then, the vertical stem of the T is deep expertise. Smaller cohorts get advanced certifications in behavioral science or service design or data analytics.
Oh, I see. So you have a baseline of empathy across the whole company, but it's backed up by hardcore specialists when things actually get complicated.
Precisely. And that structure allows for continuous iteration. They don't just launch a program and then abandon it. Marriott International operates the exact same way. They treat human resources like agile software development.
Meaning they don't wait 5 years for an onboarding program to become totally obsolete before they decide to fix it.
Exactly. They run small, quarterly experiments. They might test a new communication framework with a tiny subset of new hires, measure the data, and if it works, then they scale it.
It's constant evolution instead of just waiting for a crisis.
Yeah.
But even with agile HR and these T-shaped skills, the deepest root of a healthy culture has to be a shared sense of purpose. And Patagonia is kind of the gold standard here.
Oh, absolutely.
They don't leave purpose to chance. They design it directly into the foundation of the employee experience. When you get hired at Patagonia, your onboarding isn't sitting in some windowless room reviewing the employee handbook. You are sent out to actively participate in environmental activism projects.
Just imagine the psychological impact of that. On day one, your daily task is directly connected to the organization's deepest mission. It instantly creates a sense of belonging. They also build structural flexibility right into the schedule so employees can pursue outdoor activities, which reinforces their brand identity from the inside out.
You absolutely cannot fake that kind of alignment with a 1 to 5 survey scale.
No amount of measurement can manufacture authenticity. When employees feel seen as whole people, when the friction is removed from their daily tools, and when their work actually connects to a larger purpose, they naturally invest their discretionary effort.
Yeah.
They do great work because the environment practically demands it, not because some executive is staring at a dashboard.
So let's bring this all back to you, the listener. Think about your own daily routine. Understanding this shift from employee engagement to people experience gives you a powerful new vocabulary. If you are an individual contributor, you now have the language to advocate for better tools and less friction, rather than just complaining that the software is slow.
Exactly.
And if you manage a team, you now understand that your job isn't just to enforce rules, but to architect a healthier daily experience for your people. You don't have to settle for just asking for a better score on a survey. You have the right to a workplace that is intentionally designed for you as a complex, whole person.
But as we look toward the future, this concept of experience design is going to become staggeringly sophisticated, which actually leaves us with a provocative thought to consider on your own. Well, as artificial intelligence and predictive analytics become powerful enough to perfectly map and individualize your every working hour, automatically feeding you the exact training you need, the mentors you supposedly prefer, and the projects that perfectly fit your persona, where is the boundary? Where is the line between a hyper-tailored, incredibly supportive work environment and an invisible algorithm that's subtly manipulating your career path and choices without your explicit consent?
Wow. That is definitely something to chew on the next time a workplace system highly recommends your next career move. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. The next time you see that annual engagement survey pop up in your inbox, we hope you'll look at your workplace through the critical lens of a designer. And maybe, just maybe, it is time for organizations to stop doing postmortems on a houseplant and finally start designing a system that remembers to water it before it dies. We'll see you next time.